everybody, and welcome to the Universal Church of Truth, or perhaps the Galactic Church of Truth. Who's to say? We're talking about Star Wars, if you guys didn't get that reference. We are discussing Andor Episode 4 today. It's the second episode, but the second episode of this, but fourth episode of Andor because of that three-episode drop. I am one half of your host, Hunter.
And I'm the other one, Joe.
You got it so fast. It's great. Joe, there's a lot. This is my I kind of told you about this before we started recording, but this is my favorite of the initial four screeners that we got to check out. I was really excited for people to see it. A lot of Star Wars fans I know personally, I knew there was a lot of stuff in this episode they were going to absolutely love. I've been off Twitter for the past week, but I would like to assume that they did love it. But I haven't really gotten your opinion on the episode fully. So I would love to know, Joe. Give me your general thoughts, ideas, breakdowns. What did you think of Andor episode 4, Aldhani?
Overall, the show's great. I mean, I think it has a quality that makes it stand out and has a very. I think the first three episodes had a much slower pace overall, but the fourth episode kind of picked it up, but didn't like overdo it. It just felt like a great setup for the next arc in this storyline. Um, No, it's a great episode. You can see that Dan Gilroy wrote this. I mean, the guy made Nightcrawler,
Yeah.
and you can feel some of that tension that he can build into scenes that seem so mundane. So it's overall. I mean, the show is going great. I think I like the fourth episode best too. I confess I didn't get a chance when we got the screeners. I only saw the first three, so I went in blind this week, and yeah, great episode overall. And the show's going, if they can keep up this momentum, it could definitely be one of Disney Plus's best.
Yeah, I fully agree. To me, the reason when we got those four screeners and I was able to watch the fourth one, um, and what I think a lot of people probably felt this week watching it too, uh, it really feels like those first three episodes were kind of like that package deal, and then the fourth episode is the beginning of like the next phase of the story.
Yeah.
We're introduced to a ton of new characters. It's different planets. It's like a whole different vibe. Like you said, the pacing picks up a lot. Episode 4 of Andor really feels to me like what I imagined the whole show feeling like
Yeah.
when they first announced it and pitched it and kind of gave the general plot. Um, and it was really exciting, and I really like a lot of the new characters. I really like the direction they're going. I really like the um, what's the word, the chemistry and the dynamic between Cassian and Luthen, and seeing these early days of the rebellion is always really exciting for me. We see a lot of really cool characters. We see Mon Mothma shows up. I think that's one of the biggest things from this week's episode is getting to see Genevieve O'Reilly play that character in full, which is something we've not really gotten to see before,
True. Yeah.
which is cool. Um, by that, for the folks at home who maybe don't know what I'm talking about, Mon Mothma, uh, who is going to be a main character in Andor and was introduced in this episode, ends up in the original trilogy becoming the leader of the rebellion as a whole. And she was first shown in Return of the Jedi. Um, didn't have a huge role. We kind of just knew her as like the leader.
Yeah.
Has like a very like striking, distinctive appearance. And then in the prequel trilogy, Genevieve O'Reilly was cast as Mon Mothma by George Lucas, but most of her scenes ended up getting cut. She does appear in Revenge of the Sith, but all of her speaking scenes were cut. Um, I think Genevieve O'Reilly did voice Mon Mothma when she showed up in Rebels, but I believe that this is I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. Um, but Andor is, even though she's technically been playing Mon Mothma since like 2005, it wasn't until this year that she's actually getting to play the character completely in full, like voice, body, full on performance. And I think it's really really cool that she gets to do that now.
She did voice her in Rebels.
Cool. Yeah, and I that was always like a little nod, was like she physically appeared in Revenge of the Sith but didn't speak, and then she did she got to speak in Rebels but didn't physically appear, and now in Andor, We get
That's
full
good.
blown Genevieve O'Reilly, so and she's great. I think she's very very good in this episode.
Yeah.
Mon Mothma is going to be a favorite character for sure.
I want to point out what I thought was really interesting, especially because last time we talked about the distinctions of how the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan handled these legacy characters. There's no fanfare that this is Mon Mothma. She's a character. She shows
Yep.
up. She has her own structure, and there's no like big pause moment or oh, it's Mon Mothma. Like if you didn't know who she was, you'll have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
outside of the name, she doesn't have like the same outfit. She doesn't have. It's similar. There's distinctions to it, but this is very definitely a character who's going to turn into that. But they don't make a big deal of oh, this is Mon Mothma. They're like, no, this is a character who has the same name. If you know the casting, you know the connections, but there's no big bombastic reveal of a legacy character appearing like this.
Right, and I think that's smart for a lot of reasons. Like as you just insinuated, like I think storytelling wise, it makes her feel more grounded and real and like fit in with the vibe of the story. But then in the timeline, for me, that makes a lot more sense too, because Star Wars does like to do that with legacy characters, where like it'll be a character who is years off from being like the grand galactic figure that they end up becoming. But when they show up, there's like a little like hint, nod, fanfare, trumpets blaring, and you're like, oh yeah, like the show is telling you you're supposed to recognize them. But with Mon Mothma, at this point in the timeline, yes, she's important and influential. I mean, she's a senator, but she's not like Mon Mothma in the way that she ends up becoming later on. So it makes sense that she would kind of just show up and just be this senator who is low key, part of the rebellion in her spare time. It's cool. It's cool to see the show portrayed as that. For you know, Partly the reason why I'm doing this because I know a lot about Star Wars. Um, in both Legends and Disney canon, actually, after the events of Return of the Jedi, Mon Mothma does eventually go on to become the first president, basically, of like the new Galactic Republic. She is kind of like the George Washington of Star Wars, which is cool, except way less problematic. Um, but in terms of like a cultural figure in comparison, that is sort of like what she is, which I think is really fun. Um, yeah, we meet a lot of new characters though in this. We meet
Yeah.
the whole rebel gang, the whole rebel pocket, that I would like to think slash hope that at least for the rest of this season we'll kind of get to follow along with, maybe.
I mean,
Um,
hinting that this is Cassian Andor's first attempt at what he'll eventually perfect.
yeah, yeah. That's fair. There's a lot. I mean, the talent involved in this team. It's a lot of people who aren't like big names, but are very talented, which is exciting because for me that is like peak Star Wars is a cast of characters who like this show will make them famous. I always love like the that talent pool that Star Wars likes to dig into. Um, one of them is the kid from the end of the effing world. Is like a
Yeah,
BBC show
I
that's
thought
on
I
Netflix.
recognized him.
Yeah, and he was also in Black Mirror, but he's been in like a few different things. And it was funny every time I watched the screener, I forgot he was in this episode, and then it would come on again. I'd be like, "Oh yeah!" And then I once again forgot before I watched the actual episode, and I was like, "Holy crap!" So, like every single time, the surprise has been there. It just is funny. Um, but yeah, they're all very fun. Uh, I know I'm ranting a lot. This will be the last thing I say for this rant. Um, but yeah, I like that what this show is introducing in Rebels, the other canon show that kind of covers a lot of the same ground as Andor that takes place around the same time. They explain that at this point in the timeline, there is no singular organized rebellion like there is by the time of the original trilogy. There's pockets of rebellion
Yeah.
scattered around the galaxy, and characters like Mon Mothma and eventually Bail Organa and big names like that eventually like are the ones to unify them, which is why Mon Mothma is a big deal. And we might even see that in this show. I mean, with her being a major character. Um, but it is fun to see just how many pockets of rebellion there are around the galaxy and how different they all are from each other in how they function. like how different Andor's pocket of rebellion is from Rebels, and how they're happening at the same time in different parts of the galaxy and all that stuff. But yeah, I was wondering your thoughts too on all of this.
There's a great quote, I think, later in the episode when they're talking about, hey, what happens if people start to rebel, and it's always a thing that is small movements. It's like a pebble that starts turning into this giant boulder. And it's interesting to see this. And ironically, like Obi-Wan Kenobi also explores that aspect with its own pocket. And it's great to see that these shows that take a place around similar timelines get a chance to explore the rebellion in its purest form and before it grows into what it is. What I find most interesting about this is that they're using Cassian as he had his own rebellion, pretty much like a little small himself
Mm-hmm.
with a few friends. And now he's like, oh shit, I have to be part of an operation. I've been thrown in here. I have to do shit. I have to learn shit. Be ready. This is a suicide mission. I'm screwed. Wait, what do you mean I have to actually put my life on the line for this?
You referring to this as a suicide mission may this is dark, but that does make your joke about him perfecting it later on a lot much funnier. Uh, like, yeah, he got way better at this kind of thing. They all
I couldn't
survived this
resist.
one. They're so bad at this. Um,
What do you mean suicide mission? You survived? What is this, Mass Effect 2?
good jokes all around. Um, Yeah, no, I do think that that's all very interesting, and Andor is giving us a lot of new looks at things that we have kind of seen from this universe before. Like in a similar manner, I have a ton of notes because there actually were. It's funny because the first three episodes were noted for their lack of Easter eggs and references and stuff. And then this episode, everyone who was online saying it's terrible, like the writers of the show don't care about Star Wars. There's going to be no references or yada yada yada. And then this episode had some of the most like deep cut
Mm.
references I've ever seen in a Star Wars project. And I'm like, oh, you can never say that about the show again. Like all of that has been blown out of the water. Um, but in the same vein as it's cool to see the early inner workings of uh, the rebellion, we also get to see the behind the scenes of the like the IBS agents for the
Mhm.
Empire for the first time. That's the and of course now I'm blanking on the it's Imperial something something. But what I'm
Imperial
referring to,
security something.
oh, ISB, yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
Imperial Security Bureau, and all the Star Wars fans watching this are like, "Oh, you got it wrong." I know, guys. I'm sorry. I'm doing this post 8-hour shift, so forgive me. Um, but those are the guys who wear all white. They're the you know, Rogue One villain. They actually showed up in the original trilogy like briefly, but they never had a name or anything. Like they were just guys who wore white. General Wolf Yularen was technically the first ISB agent to ever show up in Star Wars canon. He appeared in A New Hope, and then they retconned him later to be a major character in the Clone Wars, and then he also showed up in Rebels. So, I do know things. Um,
Balancing it out.
yeah, I gotta balance it out with my like deep cut knowledge and forgetting basic information. So it's one or the other. But I thought that that was really really cool, especially getting to see some more of those agents, seeing like what their meetings look like, seeing that they are specifically there to stamp out signs of rebellion, a job that they are really bad at. But
I the perfect thing is it highlights the empire even in its early days. Its biggest fault is ego
Mhm.
because you're so high up that they're more concerned about fighting about their positions and where they stand. And it has a little, because we talked about the first episode having like Blade Runner elements.
Yeah.
This felt like a Blade Runner like environment, like the corpos, even cyberpunk,
Mhm.
these are the corpos that think, oh, they can snuff anything out because they're powerful, and they're just gathering small but slowly until they get to a point where they can't stop them anymore. And I mean, Plus, I love the sleek, clean set design. Just beautiful locations they built there.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a good quote, not from this episode, but from the last episode, actually, episode 3, I think it was, where, Cassian is talking to.
Yeah,
It's funny, I know his name, but I'm gonna just call him Stellan Skarsgård because that's just the way
Rail, I think was his name.
yeah, well, yeah, Luthen, but Stellan Skarsgård. He was talking to Stellan, and he was saying how everyone thinks that when he steals from the Empire and when he does all these crazy things, they're like, "How do you do it? What's your secret? How do you do all these crazy stunts?" And he's like, "I literally just walk in and take it." And he says they never believe that someone like me could just walk in under their noses because specifically, like you just pointed out, the ego, the ego of it all, and that will always be the Empire's downfall. That is their downfall. That's how they lose on Endors because they never think that these little teddy bear creatures are going to take them out. And because of that, all of the stuff that, like, you would think that on a forest planet they'd have some sort of precaution for swinging logs, but they just are assume that everyone is dumber than them and would never think of that. And that is their downfall, and I love that that remains consistent throughout all of Star Wars. Is the bad guys lose because they're full of themselves, and they will always lose because they're full of themselves, and that's just what it is, and I think that's beautiful. um I will say, going okay, let's get into this big old list I have.
Mhm.
um do you remember in the last episode, Joe, we discussed how in Rogue One, Cassian mentions that he's never been in prison before.
Yeah,
This episode literally starts with Cassian being like, "Yeah, I went straight out of prison into the mud." Like he literally starts this episode by saying he was in prison at one point.
I noticed that too.
I
I
was
was
like,
like,
"Oh, they're not gonna dance around it at all. They're just gonna ignore the line in Rogue One completely and like do their own thing."
he
Um,
lied. That's the answer.
Yeah, he lied, and that's the funny. And there's like a million ways you can talk yourself around that. Like you could say that when he says, "Oh, this is my first time experiencing this," he's talking about like a specific kind of I don't know. Like if you really if it bothers you that much, I'm sure there's a way around it. um, but yeah, I made a note of that, thinking it was hilarious that that was like the one of the first bits out of his mouth in episode 4. Um, but speaking of straight out of prison and into the mud, he's talking about Mimban, and Mimban is that muddy, rainy planet that was featured in Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, and I'm gonna shout out. I don't think he watches these episodes, but my friend Austin, aka Star Wars editor, um, on Instagram, Twitter, yada yada yada. Really cool guy. He makes a lot of really good content. Star Wars super fan. Love him. But he pointed out on his Instagram account, he did the math. Um, Based on Cassian's age in Andor and Rogue One, and the timeline with which he references in this episode, he was in Mimban fighting. It would place him in the same exact battle, like the battle of Mimban that Han Solo was in Solo: A Star Wars Story. We didn't see him in Solo: A Star Wars Story because obviously they probably hadn't planned that out yet, and also because it's muddy and hard to see people, and also because Cassian was apparently a cook. But canonically, Cassian Andor and Han Solo were both fighting in the Battle of Mimban, which is kind of fun, you know? Like it doesn't really mean anything, but it's one of those like fun, silly little connections. Um, but yeah, so that's something I wanted to point out for the folks at home because I think that that's like a nice little thing. Um, Also, lots of like verbal references to Rogue One in this episode. Uh, Stellan Skarsgård tells him at one point, "Oh, you'll ultimately die fighting these bastards," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, you're not hit the nail on the head with that one, buddy."
Probably a little later than he expected, but still.
Yeah, maybe a little sooner than you thought, but yeah, that is true. It turns out to be true. Um, there's also a reference that there is an increase in construction on Scarif,
Mm.
uh, which we know because we have the advantage of knowing the whole timeline, and these people don't. Um, that is because they're building like a whole big thing on Scarif, and it's like a base of operations, and it's where the Death Star plans are, and it's all this fun stuff. But yeah, there was a quite more than one Rogue One wink winks in this episode. I did kind of. I'm not. Maybe I'm a bad person, but I did sort of laugh when they were like, "You'll ultimately die fighting these bastards." I was like, I mean, we're not playing coy. Like we're just going out with it, and that's fine.
Just imagine there's the few fans that never watched Rogue One, and they're like, "Oh man, he's got 2 seasons. He's gonna be fine." And everyone's like, "What are you talking about?"
Like, yeah, and he survives both seasons. What?
Yeah,
I hate
just
to
a
be the
different
bearer of bad
Andor.
news, but the series finale is actually this movie. It's called Rogue One, and you should probably check it out. Um, yeah. Before, I mean, I can keep going down this like huge list of Easter eggs and references and stuff, but was before I become annoying and people just keep hearing my voice. Is there anything else specifically from this episode, like story wise, that you really wanted to talk about? I feel like there is a lot of good stuff. I mean, Stellan Skarsgård find out a lot more about his character in this. We find out
Yeah.
what his day job is, and that he's also leading a double life in the same exact way as Mon Mothma. We find out. I mean, we find out more about Mon Mothma in general. We meet her husband for the first time, and we see that maybe that marriage isn't like the most the most bestest marriage that's ever existed. Uh, um, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So I'd love to hear your opinions on at least some of it.
Um, I love Skarsgård's scene where he's preparing for his role. That was a pretty damn. I mean, first of all, I don't know where they get these. Every time in a movie, you see like these. They're sitting there for 3 hours to get the perfect hair makeup, and in the show, they're like, ah, and it's just it's not even like hair covering. It's like perfect line, nothing fake at all. And
100%. You're
but
good.
then him just the fake smile, just trying to get into the role. It was really really well done. And I mean, if you get Skarsgård, you want him to act his butt off.
Yeah, well, and it was a delight for me because, well, for that reason in general, because Skarsgård is just so good. So it's
Yeah,
fun to see him like also having fun in the role. You know, you almost feel that. But yeah, it's funny that his what I mean, what I assume is the real personality, which is when he's being a rebel.
mm,
He's so like not monotone but like just straightforward, and he's like, yep, you're gonna die fighting these guys, and this is what I need, and I'm telling you what's happening, and then I'm gonna go home, and then he like leaves. And then when he gets to his job, he like puts on the disguise, and he gets a lot more like cheery and flamboyant, and like he's just like, I thought it was so funny that his fake personality is the exact opposite. He's like, I love art. Everyone come look at my art. I'm enjoying life so much. And then as soon as they close the door, he's like, life is terrible. We have to overthrow the government. And I'm like, all right.
it's all a facade.
Like I can
I
vibe with
love the
that.
voice he does. He has such a it's a slightly grainy voice than he usually does. It's just this like, oh, what are you talking about? I really need to talk about the problems.
Yeah. He's like, they're not getting food anywhere. It's like, yeah, they're not. They're not. People are not eating. It's very sad. Um, yeah, so I thought all of that was really really cool. Again, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that all of these things we're talking about come with a ton of really cool references. I mentioned we see Mon Mothma, her home, and we see her husband and stuff. And the reason that that is pretty cool for Star Wars fans, she lives on a planet that I don't know if I'm pronouncing this 100. It's either like Chandrilla or like Chandrilla or something along those lines. I've only ever read it. I've never really heard it pronounced, but um, it's another core planet, which is why it looks so much like Coruscant. Which I didn't even mention. Coruscant is in this episode. It's back in live action, which is cool and exciting, and I love it. But Chandrilla is also in this episode. It's a core planet. That's why it's all pretty and fancy and beautiful and yada yada yada. Um, it kind of it's never this is the first time we're seeing this planet in
Yeah,
live action, but it's been a part of Star Wars canon and mythos for
one time.
really long time. In Disney canon, it also ends up becoming the first capital of the New Republic, and is the city like that Mon Mothma is in that we see in this is where Ben Solo ends up being born, because it's where Leia is governing and doing her like political work, post Return of the Jedi. So it is cool to finally see this planet in live action. It feels like kind of a mix of Coruscant and Alderaan, to me. It's like somewhere in between those two,
Yeah.
which is really really cool.
I did. I want to mention. I noticed a reference because you usually
Yes,
always get the chance, and this stuck out to me. Is that in the collection from Skarsgård's when he's playing his character, you can see the Star Killer armor from The Force Awakens.
yes,
What a deep cut that is.
that's what I'm saying. And you know what's crazy? That's not even the deepest cut in this episode. But yeah, it is. It's the most subtle deep cut. It is specifically the Dark Lord Star Killer armor from the Force Unleashed. I almost said the Force Awakens. The Force Unleashed video games, which those that don't know, in the mid to late 2000s, I don't think they made it into the 2010s,
No.
but they had these video games called The Force Unleashed, no longer canon. Um, Sam Witwer, who voices Darth Maul, this was technically his first Star Wars role because he played the main character, but he played this character named Starkiller, and Starkiller was Darth Vader's secret apprentice,
Yeah.
and that was the idea, was that the whole time Darth Vader always had this like Plan B backup plan aside from Emperor Palpatine, where he was secretly training his own dark side apprentice, and like together they would eventually overthrow Palpatine, and you know how the Sith work. But um, yeah, and it was like this whole video game series where you play as Starkiller, yada yada, fan favorites, very very cool.
Power
Um,
fantasy through and through.
Power fantasy through and through. Those video games are where a lot of the idea that like a someone who's powerful in the force should be able to like single-handedly pull a star destroyer out of the sky. Like that sort of stuff is what happened in those games. So cool, absolutely, undoubtedly. Power fantasy, undoubtedly. Not canon, undoubtedly. um,
Especially the DLC where he kills all the main characters.
Yeah, there's like that was like a whole people like it's canon. It's like I don't know because he's going around like killing people that are really important to later stories. So I feel like that's
Kills
not.
Luke, Leia, Han. He kills everyone.
Yeah, he ends up. There's versions of those games where he ends up becoming like literally like Dark Lord, Star like Emperor of the Galaxy himself. Um, and it's a whole thing, and that is where that armor in Luthen's shop comes from. Is it's I mean, I don't think in canon that's whose armor it is. I think that it's just a random armor he has that it purposefully is a nod to those games. But yes, Joe, I did have that written down, and I'm really happy that you brought it up.
I get to get a few references. I don't know the deep cuts, but I got one.
No, that's okay. Do you? This is exciting me. Do you have any? Did you notice any other references? Specifically because the the art shop store place whatever is like full, like there's so much in there.
I have to say, I think that was the one that stood out to me. I couldn't connect most of them. I think there was one. I don't remember now what it was, but one of them I was like, that seems familiar, but I couldn't quite point it out. But there was a lot of stuff they hid in the background, and it was just more of a I needed to sit down and go through it. But the Star
Yeah,
Killer one was like, I know that one.
yeah, well that one was really cool, plus that armor is very distinctive, so
Yeah,
it's very like, oh well, that couldn't be anything else.
I
But
actually
close.
thought they were gonna sneak in Revan's mask as well, and I was on the hunt for
Yeah,
that.
that would have been really really cool. They did have some Mandalorian armor in there, but that's like I've come to realize that's very commonplace in Star Wars, where I feel like anytime there's like an evil character, or not evil, but a character who has like a collection of things from across the galaxy, they always somehow manage to get like a full set of Mandalorian armor, like somewhere.
The rarest armor Beskar, but somehow these people always have it.
Yeah, I don't know, like there it's always there. And I get it's fun because everyone recognizes it, so it's like one of the easy Easter eggs that people can be like, aha, I watched The Mandalorian. But like, you know. Um So there's also Mandalorian armor. There was a Twi'lek Calicori, which
Oh,
in Rebels they Harrison Dula has a whole arc where Thrawn like steals her family's uh Calicori. I blanked on the name and had to check again. Um, Basically in Twi'lek culture, it's like a family heirloom that you pass down, and it's like a little wooden thing, and the different like notches and designs and stuff mean have like symbolism for family history and all that stuff. And in Twi'lek culture, it's very important that you
yeah.
are in possession of your family's Calicori. So clearly, someone is not in possession of their family's Calicori because it is actually in this shop. But I do think this is the first time we've seen one of those in live action, which is really really cool. Um, there's a couple Indiana Jones references, which is fun.
That's what the wasn't the whip somewhere.
Yep, there's a
That's what I was
Indiana Jones's
thinking.
whip is frozen in carbonite in the shop, which is fun. And I believe one of the little statues from the Temple of Doom is also like in
Mm.
there somewhere, which is fun. Star Wars has a long history of throwing Indiana Jones Easter eggs in, um, because George Lucas also co-created Indiana Jones, and there's also the Harrison Ford connection, so there's just like enough shared history there. Um, there's some stone. This I can't confirm, but there are some like stones in there that look to be runes or somehow connected to the world between worlds, which is really cool. That's another Rebels thing. Um, Again, for those that don't know, the world between worlds was a thing introduced in Rebels. It's time travel. Let's just cut to the chase. Basically, there's a through the Force and whatnot. There is this plane of existence that exists separately from reality called the world between worlds. And if you go there um, through the Force and through all of Star Wars magic and whatnot, you can basically time travel and you can like have glimpses into other times and hear voices and whatnot. That has only ever been used in the animated shows, but it does seem there were some hints of it in Andor. Don't get your hopes up; they go into it. Doesn't feel like that kind of show.
The twist ending of Andor is he saves his own life. He just goes to pulls himself out.
I mean, we laugh, but they did that in Rebels. That is how Ahsoka survives, basically. She doesn't save herself, but it's literally like right before she's supposed to die, they just pull her out and throw her in later in the timeline. I think the last major thing from that shop, since we are on the topic, there was another like not confirmed, but there are these two relics next to each other that appear to be Jedi and Sith holocrons, which is interesting. There's like a lot. If all of this is like 100% true, it's a lot of very powerful and like historically significant artifacts just chilling in loot. Like it feels like they should be protected or something if they're real.
Just the ownership of some random guy.
A Sith
Selling it.
holocron? That's like insanely. That's nuts. That's a crazy thing to have. These are like little boxes that if you're force sensitive and you hold them and you are like leaning towards the dark side or the light side or whatever, they basically will like open up and give you messages that only a Jedi or a Sith can receive. And like Sith holocrons have been used to like restart the Sith before. So it's like what this should not just be chilling on some guy's mantle like at all. Like God forbid a force sensitive like an angsty force sensitive teen wants to go art shopping one day and is like, "What's this?" and he picks it up and then it's just like Palpatine. Like no.
That's how somehow Palpatine returned.
It was the shop.
That's actually the whole story they're setting up. It's his only return in the future is because that one holocron just stuck around there.
uh Poe would be so mad. He'd be like, "Why would you do this? That's so crazy." Oh
I
my
confess
god.
because we're talking about him owning stuff. When he showed off the crystal early on, I was like, "Is that a kyber crystal? Like, where did he pull that from?"
It is a kyber crystal.
It was like, where did he get that?
It is both a kyber crystal and also the deepest cut I have ever heard in a Star Wars live action Disney canon show ever. Because he says it's a kyber crystal from, again, a name I've only ever read and never said aloud, so forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. Uh, I mean, he said it aloud in the show, but I'm already forgetting. Rakatan invaders. Um,
Yeah.
so in, well, I suppose they're Disney canon now, but until this episode came out, it was Legends canon. Um, the Rakatan invaders, their whole thing was like millennia. Like we are talking like pre High Republic, pre like as ancient as it goes in the Star Wars galaxy. They were this like alien race that they were like the original empire. Like they came through the galaxy and by force just like dominated and conquered the whole galaxy. Um, I'm forgetting off the top of my head the name, but they also called it, and it was like something Empire. It wasn't just the Galactic Empire. It was like something else. It was like the High Empire or something like that. And yeah, and then as it goes in Star Wars with this like cyclical nature of the franchise, there was a rebellion, and then yada yada yada, and then they toppled it, and I mean, you guys can fill in the blanks from there. But yeah, that was just it's one of those like Legends things that never even really had it was never even fleshed out like that much. I think it was like in the Knights of the Old Republic video game, they would talk about it having happened, but it wasn't even like a thing that happened in the Knights of the Old Republic video game. It was like they're like, yeah, forever ago. So the fact that Andor people were like they don't care about Star Wars in this show, and then they come out here and they're just name dropping like what was an Easter egg in Knights of the Old Republic was name dropped in like a Disney canon show.
Yeah.
It was insane. I like even when I was watching the screener, I did like a quadruple take. I rewound to be like that's real, and I was thinking, again, I happen to be off Twitter this week, but I don't. I imagine it was a point of interest for some people, for sure, because that is crazy. Before I get into other Easter eggs, I do have a note here that I would like your opinion on, Joe. I wrote Aldhani is just Scotland.
Yeah. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful.
Beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Scotland, though.
I mean, at least it's not Tatooine, you know?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not, it's not a
No,
one specific type. It's just nice Scotland.
it's Scotland. That's one of my favorite Star Wars things, though, is when they like don't have a new like bio. I'm again blanking on the word, but a new like biodome,
Fine.
whatever. Um, and they're yeah, biome. Thank you. They don't have that, and then they're just like, we're just gonna film in like a pretty country, and that's we're gonna pretend the whole planet is this. It's like how Alderaan is just Switzerland. Like that's they're like, we'll do a planet, but it's actually just Switzerland. That's what we're doing.
I should come to the Alps. It's just the Alps. That's the
Yeah,
Austrian planet.
yeah. That's literally. I was on a train through Switzerland once in my lifetime, and it was just Alderaan. Like I was like, oh yeah, it's just Alderaan. Um, but I thought it was funny, and that also means, guys, if you saw Aldhani and you were like, "This place is beautiful. I wish I could go there in real life." Guess what? You can. It's just called Scotland. So just go to Scotland.
Andor does to Scotland what Lord of the Rings did to New Zealand.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because they even say we're in the Aldhani Highlands, and I'm like, you
Yeah.
mean the Scottish Highlands? That's where you
Not
are.
even subtle. Not
It's
even,
not
maybe
subtle at all.
Aldhani. The name is they gave it to a Scottish person. Can you say something and just Aldhani? That's how it works.
Oh man, yeah, it was great. I got a good laugh out of that. It didn't even click with me when I watched the screener, but watching it this time around, and they were like the Aldhani Highlands, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is it's just Scotland.
But it's
Um,
beautiful to see them shoot on location, and they really use that location perfectly.
oh, it's gorgeous. That's the thing. Is like that's not a knock on the
Mm.
show at all. I think it's funny, but I also think it was the right move because it's gorgeous and like you said, being able to go to places like that and shoot on location is just beautiful. I mean, as much as I like and appreciate and think that um, the thing, the
The
special
volume.
effects thing. Yep, the volume. My brain is not in it today. The volume is good for like the Mandalorian and all that stuff. Not knocking that at all. I think they use that really well. But you can tell that that Andor is shot on location and not in a digital studio. And it does make a difference. I mean, I think it looks really nice.
I
Um,
think we're also slowly going back to that era because the volume kind of got its usage during quarantine when no one knew. Could we film there? I mean, Moon Knight director said they had everything ready to film in Egypt and just said no,
yeah,
like weeks before. So now we're back to, oh, we can go to a location again.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Um, but oh gosh, yes. Okay, this is another thing I noted, and I specifically wanted your opinion on it, Joe. Um, one of the members of the group of the rebellion. I like all of them. We don't get a ton of information on a lot of them. Honestly, the kid from End of the Effing World gets like the most
The
because he's
most.
clearly like he has like a very specific personality trait. Um, but the one member of the team is an Imperial mole, which I always like. I feel like that's like a thing that every Star Wars like Black Ops team has is their like
Mm.
Imperial mole. Um, whether it be uh Obi-Wan Kenobi had it, Rebels had it. Everyone's got their Imperial mole. You need that to get in, apparently. But I like that guy a lot. He was really really cool. And I was also wondering. So I was wondering what you thought of him, and then I was also wondering what you thought of um Bell, who is the leader of this like rebellion pocket that is sort of taking orders from Stellan Skarsgård, but like the team doesn't know that she's taking orders from Stellan Skarsgård, except for Cassian, who's going by Clem, and his real name might be Casa. Who knows? But anyway, I would love your thoughts on this, Joe.
I loved his entrance. This guy just walks in and they don't like put it, oh, he's an Imperial soldier or undercover or anything. It's just you can tell by the armor. And he just walked in like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, by right. I mean, they're doing this operation for God knows how long, and then Skarsgård is just like, this guy's new. He's your problem. Act as if he's not new.
Right? That was crazy. It was insane. And I feel like the team was justified to
Yeah.
be concerned. They're like, we've been working on this for months, and now days before the operation, you're like, here's a new guy you've never met before. Trust him with your life. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy.
Not prepared, nada.
Yeah, like not like he doesn't know anything. Let's teach him now. It's like that's crazy. Um, Iban Mas Bakrek, I think I pronounced that correctly. Sorry if I did not. AKA the guy from The Bear, AKA Microchip in Netflix's The Punisher. That's right. I noticed and I remembered. Hashtag long live the Netflix shows. Anyway, uh, he's in Marvel and Star Wars now. He's in this, and I am curious your thoughts. There seems to be from him a slight bit of opposition to Vel's leadership. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that and whether or not you think that might come into play later. Do you think they're going to go down the route of them losing confidence in her as a leader, or and maybe appointing this other guy, or do you think they're going to stick to the plan, or how do you think this is going to go down?
Um, I think it's gonna go horribly wrong.
Fair enough.
It's just something about like even last the first three episodes it went horribly wrong, and I feel like this is gonna be the thing that starts turning Andor into the guy we know. It's just that he's like part of these rebellions, and just everyone's like so over their heads. He'll somehow weasel by. I'm curious of how it connects to what Rail's doing, Skarsgård's character,
Mm,
but it's I don't know. It's such a misfit band where even if they did have months to prepare, I feel like something's just not in calculated. Because when Cassian shows up, it's like you guys are a little crazy for doing this. This is not gonna work. And then like, oh yeah, learn this by tomorrow. Can I finish dinner first?
I will say the girl who's like a medic, like the one who was patching up. She might not be just a medic, but the one who was doing medic work on
Yeah.
Cassian, when he showed up, she's done nothing wrong.
No.
That may or may not be because I have a huge, massive crush on her immediately. Um, it might not be. Who's to say? But she's immediately my favorite, so we'll see. We'll see where that goes. Um,
I have to say though, the kid who says everything and spells it out, I feel he has the red flag of death all over his head.
oh yeah, the one he's like, no, don't touch that. It falls apart sometimes. And
Yeah.
he's like, I gotta take care of it. I gotta take care of it. I'm just like, oh, you're adorable, and you're gonna die.
Oh.
It's like, wow, they really want us to like you quickly. You're gonna die. Like,
We watch TV.
I've seen TV before. I know you're not gonna make it, and that's okay. I'll
It
cherish the
would be
time while
so ironic if he's the only one besides Andor to survive by the end of this.
you're.
He's just stuck with this kid.
That's like that really is the uh I don't know how to phrase it, but it is funny that we know for a fact that Cassian Andor is going to survive this show, but we only know that because we know for a fact he's gonna die immediately afterwards.
Not even like, oh, he made it out. Oh, I'm so happy. It's like, nah. He
And
got
we
like,
know the show goes right up to Rogue One too, so it's not even like, oh, the show ends and then there's room for like, yeah, but then there's like 10 years. Like he could have had a wonderful 10 years. It's like no,
no.
he's gonna have hardship after hardship and then die, and that we
Like
know that already.
this show is gonna drag him down through every worst scenario and then be like, oh, happy ending. And then it's just the opening shot of Rogue One of him.
Yeah, because the show is probably gonna have somewhat of a happy ending where he's like, I love the rebellion and this is my family now, and like
I
the
found
show's
my
over.
sister.
Yeah. And then they're just like, we need you to go break Jin Urso out, and he's he's like, oh yeah, I'm sure nothing bad will happen, and then he goes, um, Gorman. I know I'm just hopping right into another Easter egg. Uh, during Mon Mothma's debate
Mm.
with, I say debate argument with her husband, and he's like, yeah, this is where the cool kids sit, and she's like, cool kids, they're starving the people of Gorman. Um, Gorman is unfortunately going to be years down the line the site of like this huge massacre. Um, Mon Mothma is saying how they don't have enough food to survive because
Huh.
of the things that are because it's crazy how that happens sometimes when the government doesn't supply people with food that need food. I live here in America. Uh, anyway, um, yeah, so she is hinting that they're not getting the supplies that they need, and in canon, the people of that planet ultimately start protesting because they're not getting the supplies that they need. And then the Empire is like, well, we don't like you either, and then just kills all of them, and it's very sad. So yeah, that is like a fun little Easter egg in case people were like, that name sounds kind of familiar. It's not. It's been in like one other thing, so don't look too hard into it. But it is another cool little name drop. Another name drop when Cassian is trying to figure out what Stellan Skarsgård is a part of, and he doesn't really know about the early foundations of the rebellion. He lists a whole bunch of names. He says the guilds, so people who watch The Mandalorian know that means like the Bounty Hunters Guild. Um, but he also mentions the partisans, which, to the keen ear, that is Saw Gerrera's group of
Mm.
of
Who gets
rogues.
name dropped?
So yeah. He does. But I thought I did pick up specific. I don't know why I picked up on partisans. Um,
You were looking for the deep cuts. It's like
I know.
Saga. Yeah, I heard about you before.
Because that's sort of my like job is to pick up the Easter eggs I feel like other people might not pick up. So I picked up Partisans, where I was like, oh yeah, people know Saw Gerrera has a group, but they maybe don't know what it's called. It's called the Partisans. In case anyone wasn't 100% sure about that one, there's an Utapau reference. Utapau is a personal favorite Star Wars planet of mine. Utapau has a long, fun history. For those in the dark, Utapau is I just love saying that name too. By
It's
the way,
a
Utapau.
that's something.
Um,
Mon Mothma Utapau.
Utapau. Utapau sounds like it's like a cool like, hey, that's Utapau. Utapau is the planet in Revenge of the Sith where Obi-Wan Kenobi kills General Grievous and where he is when Order 66 happens, and it's the home planet of the Grand Inquisitor and the Powans. It is the home planet of the big creepy guy with yellow teeth, who's played by the same guy who was in the original Mad Max movies. Cultural deep cuts. Um, yeah, it's cool. I like that it's like just a bunch of holes, and then in the holes are where people live, and then above the holes are where like crazy monsters live.
I always
There's
think of the
also
lizard.
yeah, the fun big lizard things. There's an unproduced Clone Wars arc that did not make it into season 7, but you can watch it on YouTube. The animatics, Crystal Crisis on Utapau. It's a story arc where Obi Wan and Anakin have to go to Utapau because um, there's an issue with kyber crystals because the Empire is in the early stages. Well, that's not the Empire yet, but the parts of the Republic that are probably going to become the Empire are in the early stages of planning the Death Star, and no one knows about it, and that's like a whole thing. But I love Utapau. There's an Utapau name drop. Always love to hear Utapau referenced. There is a Ryloth sector name drop. That is, count them, two Twi'lek Easter eggs in one episode because not only is there the Kalikori, but Ryloth is the Twi'lek home planet. Ryloth has been featured heavily in all of the animated shows, but I don't think it's ever shown up in live action.
I don't think so. No.
Um, one of the last Easter eggs I have written down, Arvala 6. Um, this is fun because this is actually a Mandalorian reference. Uh, Arvala, the Arvala sector, as they may call it, actually was introduced in The Mandalorian. Um, those of you who are well versed in that show might remember Arvala 7. Arvala 7 is the desert planet that the whole shebang starts on. It's the planet where Din meets Grogu. It's the planet that they go back to a few times. It is the planet where our friend Nick Nolte said, This is, or no, not this is the way. What is the thing he says?
I have spoken.
I have spoken. That is where I have spoken comes from. Again, sorry guys. I'm doing a pretty good job here, actually. I won't lie. So yeah, we've never seen Arvala 6, but we've seen Arvala 7, and one might assume that Arvala 6 is right next door.
It's it's kind of maybe the Empire in its early days, like having fun and just name planets 1 to 7, and there's like let's keep out 4 so people will start looking for 4.
Yeah, that would be. I like that. I like that thought process. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of like major Easter eggs and things worth breaking down and talking about, that about covers it. Joe, um, we got time for maybe like one or two more little topics here. What
Mm.
anything else story wise that jumped out to you that you want to discuss? Any theories, thoughts, ideas? I would love to hear them.
I I love the fact that we're introducing Cassian Andor into the rebellion officially, even if it's a splinter cell. And the thing is that he still is not going by his real name. And it's like, well, you have to make up a fake name. So what is that setting up?
Right.
So either he's going to see someone he knows that's going to create the I thought your name was Clem, or what's happening here potentially. Why is if Skarsgård is in planning this whole thing, if he's responsible for the whole thing, why is he telling Cassian to hide his identity in front of other rebellions? Does that mean all their names are also fake?
That's a good point. One thought I had was Stellan Skarsgård. I'm gonna keep calling him that. Sorry, but Stellan Skarsgård's how he what his plan is for Cassian is still sort of vague because
Yeah.
the way he recruits Cassian implies that he really does think that Cassian is like one of the future faces of the rebellion. Like he really thinks Cassian has what it takes to be a major player in taking down the Empire. That's the vibe he gives off.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's just, part of his recruitment or whatnot, like who's to say? But then when he meets up with the rebellion group and he's basically telling them, oh, he's just alone. Like we don't really care about him. Like he's just here to help you because he's well versed in
Mm.
things. If he dies, he dies. That whole thing. If he is the problem, kill him. Like it doesn't matter. Yada yada. So like the vibe he's giving off to different people is different things. Of course, it appears he's like a leading figure in the rebellion at this point. So, Nick Fury style, having his lies have lies like that, it makes sense that he would maybe
Yeah.
be giving off different impressions to other people. But yeah, it's a good point. Part of me wonders, does everyone have fake names for the sake of cover? Because we don't know what these other rebellion people like, if they do anything else, if they have other lives, like if
No.
what's going on. And if not, like, did he lie to Cassian? Does he really just want to use him as like throwaway for this mission because he thinks he's good fodder? And he's like, well, if he survives, I'm just going to send him back to whatever he was doing, so he might as well use a fake name. To
Mm.
your other point, if someone is going to accidentally out Cassian to the crew, it would probably be Vix, because
Mm.
Vix wasn't in this episode, but Vix isn't dead, and
Yeah.
will presumably come back at some point, and will presumably want to find Cassian and figure out what's going on. Um, so I could see Bix like finding him, or if Bix is in Imperial captivity, them like bumping into a captive Bix and her being like Cassian, and everyone is like, what? And it's like this whole thing.
Your
Um,
name is Clem.
yeah, that feels more. Again, we've seen TV. That feels more likely.
Yeah.
The other option is just that at a certain point he like accepts them as his new family and is just like, I gotta be honest with you guys, my name's not Clem, and they're all like, and then he has to like figure it out from
Oh
there.
god.
But
Season of the Liar revealed storyline.
yeah,
Because
more
you
likely
mentioned
that he'll bump
Biggs.
into someone else. But
Yeah. But there is a chance that they are seemingly hinting at Karn's return.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, we didn't even. Oh my gosh, how did I not? I feel so silly and embarrassed, Joe. There's so much to talk about in this episode. Karn is in this episode. We see him for a minute. He gets fired. He doesn't just get fired. Let's be clear about that.
Kicked out.
He's not just fired. His entire job, like, not just the job. This would be like if you screwed up so bad that they didn't just fire you, someone else came in and just shut down your whole company. Like you're like, everyone go home. This guy sucks. So everyone has to go home. Like that's insane.
That's
And then he goes home and he has to knock on his mom's door, and what does she do? She slaps him. And you know what? Good for her.
my baby.
I know, it was
And when she
very
gets at the
Italian of her.
neighbors,
I
like, what are you
respected it.
looking at?
Karn is Italian confirmed, because that's an Italian mom move
This
for
this
sure.
is NYC Italian in space.
Slap my baby. What thunder you would call me? It's like,
You should have talked to me first.
yeah. Yeah. We can bump through this quickly. I don't know how much time you got, but like Karn, yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you think his storyline is going? Because I have an idea, and people might not like it or agree with me, but I do have an idea. So
I think Karn is probably they're setting him up as this like he has a very set goal. He wants to follow that. And I think this is likely going to turn into like a revenge storyline where he's going to go out of his way to find out where the hell Cassian Andor is. Or alternatively, he's going to go to the IBS because they're the ones who shut him down, ISB, who shut
I
him
know I
down and
keep
be
saying
like,
IBS too. That's irritable bowel syndrome. It's not the same thing. So I'm
damn dyslexia.
for for me, it's not even dyslexia. It's just the fact that I probably have IBS and I talk about it a lot, so it's in my brain. Sorry for the
Excuse
folks
me.
at home. That was a lot of information, but you know what, guys? We can't all be perfect. All right, please continue.
I feel like they're setting him up for something, and I can see him either trying to go to ISB and be like, "Hey guys, I can do my job. I'm good at this." I would love for his I forgot the name of the guy who has the accent, who was in the Batman, I think, as well. Where we had at the end where it's like where he's the one guy from ISB is like, "Everyone, you guys are fired," and the one guy's just at the end like, I'm gonna ask.
um, can I give you my listen? I
Mhm.
don't know. Maybe it's just pretty much every Star Wars story that there is has one character who starts as a bad guy and by the end of the story is a good guy.
Mm.
And it's sometimes obvious, sometimes not. Does Karn suck? Yeah, right now. But he's also without a job. And he's not an Imperial officer.
Mm.
Uh, but he might go after I almost said IBS again. He might go after the ISB. Uh, and maybe he does. I'm not convinced of this. I'm not saying this is like like 100%. What I'm saying is, I think there is a chance that Karn is our like
Mm.
he's our guy. He's our guy who turns by the end. I mean, I'm not saying it's gonna happen fast. Like it's gonna happen immediately. We have 2 seasons that take place over 5 years. Like I don't know how it's gonna play out. Um, I do think it's possible. I think that Andor does seem to be taking a lot of cues from Rebels. I don't think that's on purpose because I don't think that either of the Gilroys care. But but uh,
Boy.
yeah, they don't. But Rebels had a very similar character where for the first like 2 out of 4 seasons, there's a character named Agent Callus, and Agent Callus was essentially like the Karn of that show. He was like the Imperial officer who was tasked with taking down, the specific rebel cell, and was like the one of the main villains of the first 2 seasons, and then he ends up interacting with the good guys more. He ends up having some traumatic experiences. He ends up having some bad experiences with the Empire. And then by the end of the show, he has completely reformed and he has left the Empire and become like an officer in the rebellion. Um, which is cool and great. And it's a fun story. And, Star Wars, a lot of Star Wars does lie in redemption. And again, literally, like I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Star Wars story of any kind that doesn't have at some point one character who like flops sides, because that's just like ingrained in Star Wars. And to me, of the characters we've met thus far, because Tim is dead, he seems like the guy who's gonna
Yeah.
do that. Again, do I think that the next episode he's going to be like, I'm a good guy now? No, I do not think that. But I think that by the end of 2 seasons that take place over the course of 5 years, there is a chance that he flippity flops. Maybe he eats his Italian mom's cooking again and is like, I remember why I loved in the first place.
That's blue milk and green pasta or something.
Yeah, he has like Star Wars pesto, and he's like, wow. He's like, everything's different now. Um,
I my worries is I'll say that if he turns good, I don't feel like his mom's gonna survive for long. There's always, I mean, if you're talking
good
like this
back.
is a Gilroy led project, someone is going to change their mind because something dramatic happens.
Yeah, maybe he gets to have like an Aunt May. Like, sorry if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet, but maybe he gets to have like a Aunt May Peter moment. Willem Dafoe
Just
comes
he
in for like
wrestles
one
Cassian
episode.
Andor like Peter Parker was sumo slamming him through the floor.
That would actually be fire. I hope that by the end of this show, there's a fight scene where Karn and Cassian just like full blown like WWE, like throwing each other off the ropes for no reason. 20 something, early 20s, 40-year-old Cassian up against Card. Oh man, it was weird because he shaves his beard in this, and it
Yeah.
was really weird because I don't remember the last time I looked at Diego Luna without facial hair,
I
and
think that
it
that became his staple. It wasn't even
yeah,
an
like
Andor
that's
thing.
part of
It
his
was just
face. It was really weird to see it not there.
the contractual nightmare to go to Diego Luna, like, you have to shave for this. He's like, no.
He's like, yeah, no,
More
it's not happening. I don't know what to say.
contractually, this is me.
Yeah, this is part. It actually is part of my face. It hurts if it goes away.
That's why
Um,
it's not clean shaven. He had to leave a little bit. That was
yeah,
like
there has to be some.
percentage.
Otherwise, it would just be skeleton. It'd be weird. Uh, um, with that, is there anything else? Because I was really into these like deep cuts, and I feel like you're good at bringing us back to like the character work to talk about. Am
Mm.
I? What else am I forgetting, Joe? Am I forgetting anything else important?
I think we covered most of it. I mean, the episode was surprisingly straightforward. We're seeing the episodes get longer.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're seeing a lot here is that they're doing the groundwork. So I think we covered most of that. It's going to be interesting how it develops. And I think we're going to see a lot of tension with Andor in his new campmates. Because if he can't deliver what they need from him, she had to. I think this is maybe the one thing we didn't talk about is that Vel had to pretend that he was part of the plan the entire time,
Right.
and that makes it even worse if he can't. So the pressure's on him to be able to pretend like that, and he was on his own pretty much all this time. He was pretty much a smuggler. So this is a big deal, and we're going to see now, is Andor really capable at doing it on his own? And I have a feeling that whatever he's going to accomplish in this mission, that we'll see with Skarsgård's character how their relationship will evolve as well.
Right. And I mean that's literally how the episode ends. Like that's
Yeah,
where we are at currently in the story. Um, is the pressure of him to figure this all out. And I mean, literally, the last scene in the episode is her being like, "Okay, here's like a full book of everything.
learn this
Memorize it
language.
by the morning." And then that's how like, and just the look of, oh boy, and then
He had
yeah,
the
then
same
cut to
look as every
credits.
college student when they realize, shit, I did have a test tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the vibe. Obviously we know from Rogue One that Cassian is that dude, and that Cassian probably can do it. Um, but how well he meshes with this group, and how that well that mission goes off, I mean, probably find that out next week, next episode. I mean, at the very least, we'll have a better idea of how it will go. But it seems like the mission is just about upon us. So, um, I'm excited to see how it plays out. I'm I mean, I'm really excited for episode 5 because it'll be the first episode that I haven't seen yet. I for these first 4 episodes, I have known what happens in them for. I mean, there's delays in release and everything, so for months at this point. And this will be my first new Andor content in months, so I'm excited. I'm very excited to see how this plays out. Um, if that's all we got, I have been one half of your host at in the Galactic Church of Truth, the Universal Church of Truth, whatever your heart desires.
And I was the other half.
Joe, yay! Yeah, everyone, thank you for watching, and we will see you